So now I'm going to show you how to make electrocompetent cells. And this is required to do transformations using electroporation as a procedure. So you'll need some ice, you will need some ice-cold 10% glycerol, you will need some sterile tips, some sterile ependopes, and you will need your cells. Now it's really important that the optical density of these cells is around 0.7. So you need to make sure that you keep an eye in the orbital shaker to the cultures and that you measure it regularly. And I will show you also how to do this. So the first thing that we need to do is to get the Bunsen burner on. And we need to put some ependopes into the ice to make sure that they will be cold. Usually, an aliquot of this size will be enough for about 4 ependopes, so that's what I'm going to put in the ice. Once we've done this, we need to centrifuge the cells in the centrifuge again. Once you've checked the optical density is around 0.7 or just below that, then you have to centrifuge the cells. But this time you have to do it at 4 degrees because everything has to be done under cold conditions. And also the speed is 3000 RPM because you don't want to go too fast because you need these cells to be alive. So you make sure that before you start, you set the centrifuge at 4 degrees. It takes about half an hour, and then you just open the lid. As with the other centrifuge, you put your samples and you make sure you put a balance. And then just start and go. After 5 minutes, just get your cells out. You might as well leave the balancing because you're going to be using the centrifuge a few times now. After spinning the culture down, we need to close by the flame, decant the supernatant into a waste flask, making sure that none of the media remains in there. And now we need to resuspend it in 5 milliliters of 10% ice-cold glycerol, which again has to be sterile. So the easiest way is just to add it slowly until you get to the 5 milliliter mark. And once you have done that, close it and gently resuspend by tapping the bottom of the tube. You don't want to pipette up and down because you do not want to disturb the cells. Once the cells are completely resuspended, we need to centrifuge again for 5 minutes at 3000 RPM. Once the cells are resuspended on the glycerol, we put them on the centrifuge again. 5 minutes, 3000 RPM. Once the centrifuge is finished, just get your sample back out again, and you need to repeat this step twice. After your 3 washes, just get your sample out of the centrifuge and go back to your bench. After your 3 glycerol washes, you just, as before, decant the supernatant onto your waste flask. But now what you are going to do is resuspend the cells in the residual volume that you've got left. It usually should be about 200 microliters, which is why I prepared 4 ependopes on the ice. So now using a pipette set at 50 microliters and some sterile yellow tips. You gently resuspend your cells. Once your cells are resuspended, they're ready to be aliquoted onto your ependoves. So if you get your ice box as close as possible, you can then open all of those ependoves and start adding your 50 microliter aliquots. Now close these ependoves. Make sure you label them. The top might be a bit wet, so make sure you dry it before you start. So these are ET cells. And now you've got 50 microliter aliquots ready for electroporation. If you're going to use them immediately, you keep them on the ice. If not, store at -80 degrees for further use, and they should not be used after a year of them being stored. So now I'm going to show you how to carry out an electroporation. So we've got the competent ET electrocompetent cells that we just made before, and we've got our plasmid DNA that we want to introduce into those cells. So the first thing to do is to add 2 microliters of that plasmid into those cells. And remember to keep everything on ice at all times and to work as fast as possible. So you pipette it a couple of times up and down, and you put them back into the ice. Now the cells are ready to be electroporated, and hopefully the DNA will go in. To do this, you need a cuvette, which has to be ice cold, so I suggest that you put it into the ice bucket about an hour before you start, and then you just open the electroporation packet and the electroporation cuvette. Now hold it by the lid and be really careful to not touch those metal plates. So we need to put the cuvette, that little plastic bit has to be facing forward when it goes into the cuvette. Now remove the lid. You will not need the lid anymore. Use your 50 microliter pipette. I've put 52 because we've got the 2 extra microliters from the plasmid. Get your cells out of the ice and gently pipette them into the cuvette. Leave the ependove on the ice box because you will need to use it again. So now you just put the cuvette safely in the chamber. The settings are EC1, that's the one that you want, and that is the one that happens when you turn it on. And now you just spray pulse, and it's just, the cells have just received an electric shock. If you want to check the amount of voltage that went through the cells, you just go to your measurements and it will give you that number on times per milliseconds. Anything above 3, it's a really good ratio. So this one worked really well. If you get a 0 here, your electroporation hasn't worked, and therefore you just have to throw the cells and get a new aliquot and start again. You're going to go back to normal. Once you've got this, you need to get those cells out of there. So 750 microliters of broth, in this case is LB broth. You get your cuvette out. Is it okay? It's okay now to touch the metal plates because the transformation has already happened. And you just mix the cells gently up and down. And put them back on their original ependot tube. Now you can see that there is still some liquid remaining there, so what you usually do is you put your other pipette at about 200 microliters. And you try to get as much of that culture as possible, so there we go, because this yellow tip will actually go in the chamber. And after you have done that, you have to put the cells in the orbital shaker for 60 to 90 minutes to let them recover from the shock. So after the electroporation, you need to give them about 60 to 80 minutes to recover, to put them in the orbital shaker. Just wait until the tray stops, lay them flat on the tray, and make sure you secure them using some tape. To make sure that that is secure, I always like to put more tape on the sides. Once it feels secure, close the lid and stay and check that the sample, that the ependorf is not going to come off. And now just leave it here for just over an hour. Whilst the cells are recovering from the shock in the orbital shaker for 60 to 90 minutes, make sure that you prepare at least one plate of media for them to be plated afterwards. These plates should contain usually nutrient agar or LB agar, plus the antibiotic of choice, which in our case is apromycin, and make sure you label the plate and that you write exactly what's in there, your name and the date. After 60 to 80 minutes, just collect your cells from the orbital shaker. So just pull the tape out, close it again, and now your cells are ready to be plated. Once you've got your cells out of the orbital shaker, you need to plate them on the plate that you have just made. So it needs to be done under sterile conditions. So again, Bunsen burner on, turn your plate and just pipette the whole volume of that plate, of the ependorf, into the plate. So you pipette all of your cells and you just plate them in there. Because it's such a large volume, you don't even need a spreader, you just gently shake them, shake the liquid to make sure it covers the whole surface. As you can see, this is fairly easy. However, if you're not sure, it is okay to use a sterile spreader and just to spread them. Now open the plate and leave it to dry for about 20 to 30 minutes. If you are going to leave the flame unattended for a few seconds, just make sure that you turn it to the yellow. Once the plate has dried, just close it. Make sure that when you turn it upside down, there's nothing, no liquid running through. Turn it that way and it's ready to go in the incubator. So switch off your Bunsen burner and just put it, because it is E. coli, put it at 37 degrees.